Why including everything in your book is destroying your authority. One of the biggest mistakes I see experts make when they decide to write a book is the instinct to include everything they know. And it makes complete sense. You've built years of experience. You've learned lessons the hard way. You've helped clients through dozens, maybe hundreds of situations. So when you sit down to plan your book, the thought process usually goes like this. I'll put it all in. I'll make this incredibly valuable and I'll make sure nothing is left out. And emotionally, that feels really good. It even feels responsible and it feels like the right thing to do because as an expert, you're wired to teach, you're wired to share, and you're wired to make sure people don't miss anything important. But here's the problem with that. That instinct, the one that feels so right, is often the very thing that weakens the authority of your book. And what actually happens is this. When a book tries to include everything, something subtle happens. The book becomes broad, and when a book becomes broad, your authority becomes very vague. And the reader isn't thinking, this person understands my exact situation. What they're thinking instead is that this person knows a lot. And that sounds like a compliment, but it's not the reaction you want. Because when a reader feels impressed, they close the book and say, that was great. When a reader feels understood, they close the book and say, this is the person I need to work with. Having a book that is broad will create confusion for your reader. Not because you've written it badly, not because you lack the value in it, but because the reader can't find themselves clearly inside the pages of your book. And when a reader has to work to figure out whether this book is for them, they are most likely not going to take any action. So remember that confusion never converts into clients. The concept of illusion is this. This is where, exclusion. This is where most experts get uncomfortable because great authority books are not built on inclusion. They're built on exclusion, meaning that not everything you know belongs in this book. Not every lesson, not every framework, not every client story, not every insight you've gathered over the years. And even more confronting, not every reader is meant to feel catered to by this book. Some people should read it and think, this isn't really for me. And that's not a failure. That is what's called precision. Because the more clearly the wrong reader can see themselves out of it, the more clearly the right reader sees themselves inside of it. Authority through precision. So let's talk about that. Authority is not created by demonstrating how much you know. Authority is created when the reader feels deeply understood. They don't feel impressed by your knowledge. They feel seen in their situation. And that's the shift that goes from this author knows a lot to this author gets me. And when that shift happens, trust accelerates. And the reader doesn't need any more convincing. They don't need more content. They don't need more proof. They already feel safe. And safety is what leads to action. Why this feels uncomfortable, and this is why this is so hard for experts, because you are wired to teach thoroughly. You are wired to make sure nothing important is missed, and you are wired to be helpful. But a book is not meant to teach everything you know. A book is meant to do one very specific job, to position you as the obvious next step for a very specific type of reader. And that only happens through deliberate exclusion. This is why the most important decisions about your book don't happen during the writing phase. They happen before the writing ever begins. Because if you start writing before you've decided what belongs in this book and what doesn't, you will naturally default to including everything. And that's where authority quietly gets diluted. This is exactly the kind of decision framework I walk people through in my session called Is This Book Worth Writing? Because before you write a single word, you need to be clear on what the book is meant to do. And just as importantly, what it is not meant to do. That clarity changes everything.